I remember that day like it was yesterday. It was a Monday morning, the kind of morning that felt like any other. The sun was up, the coffee was just right, and I was ready to dive into the tasks of the day at Greenstone Technologies. I had been there for over a decade, a company that had grown with me. I had worked tirelessly to build my reputation, managing big accounts, bringing in new clients, and steering some of our most important projects. They were all things I took great pride in, but like most people who had been in a job for a while, there were times when I wondered if I was being truly appreciated. It was around 10:30 a.m. when I got the email. Thomas wants to see you in his office. Now? That's when the first red flag went up. See, Thomas wasn't the kind of guy who just asked for a meeting without a good reason. We had spoken the day before, and everything seemed fine. He was his usual self, brief, to the point, and never really much for pleasantries. So this sudden request to meet face to face wasn't sitting right with me. I grabbed my things, nothing too special, just my notebook and the coffee cup that had been with me for years, and walked over to his office. The air in the hallway felt unusually still, as though the office itself knew something was coming. I had been through hundreds of meetings in this very building, so I wasn't exactly worried. But as I approached the door, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I knocked and walked in, trying to keep my composure. There was Thomas, sitting behind his sleek, polished desk. He didn't even look up from his computer when I entered. It was strange. Normally, he'd at least acknowledge me with a greeting or a simple nod. But today, there was nothing. "Sit down," he said, his voice colder than usual. He motioned to the chair in front of him, still not lifting his eyes. As I sat down, I had no idea what was coming. I didn't think I had done anything wrong, and nothing was out of the ordinary with my work. I had been managing my accounts well, handling client relations efficiently, and meeting my deadlines. But there was something in the air, something heavy that made my gut twist. "Eli, I don't know how to put this gently," he started, finally looking up. His face was serious, no hint of the usual business smirk he carried. "I've been made aware that you've been interviewing with other companies. I've been told you've been seeking opportunities outside of Greenstone." I blinked, unsure if I had heard him right. "What?" "No, Thomas, I've never done that," I said, trying to stay calm, though my heart was starting to race. "I've always been focused on my work here. I've only ever asked for a raise a couple of times, and it wasn't to look for another job." Thomas leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers together like he was preparing for a grand announcement. "I understand, Eli. But the fact is, this situation puts us in a difficult spot. You're looking elsewhere, and we're not going to wait around for you to make a decision about your future. This affects the team, the company, and our clients." My mind was spinning. This wasn't happening. Not like this. I had always given my best to this company, had been loyal, and yet now I was being accused of something I hadn't done. Sure, I had looked into the possibility of exploring other opportunities, but it was purely out of frustration with my stagnant salary. I had hoped that my years of loyalty and hard work would eventually be rewarded, but it seemed like that was a pipe dream. "You're fired, Eli," Thomas said, his words like a slap across the face. "I don't think we can continue our relationship here. You've made it clear that your interests lie elsewhere, and we can't keep you on under these circumstances." The room seemed to grow smaller, the walls closing in. I sat there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. I'd been let go, just like that. All my years of work, all the nights I had stayed late and sacrificed family time to meet deadlines. It was all meaningless in that moment. It didn't matter to Thomas. My chest tightened, and I took a deep breath, trying to compose myself. "I see," I finally said. "So, that's it?" Thomas barely looked at me, his attention back on the papers in front of him. "Yes, that's it. You'll need to pack up your things and leave." I stood up, trying to hold my composure, but I could feel the anger rising in me. I had always been loyal to this company, but in a split second, they were throwing me out like I was nothing. I grabbed my things, a few photos of my kids, a couple of books, and a mug that had been a gift from a client, and headed for the door. As I walked out of that office, I was escorted by HR, who didn't say a word the entire way. The security guard even gave me a nod, as if to say, "I've seen this before." I stepped out into the parking lot, the sun hitting my face, but it felt like I was standing in the shadow of everything I thought I had built. How could this happen? How could they just throw me away like this? I sat in my car, staring at the steering wheel for what felt like an eternity. For the first time in years, I didn't know what was next. The company that I had helped build was gone. The career that I had sacrificed so much for was over. And in that moment, as I drove away from Greenstone for the last time, I realized something. I had given so much of myself to that company, but in the end, they didn't care about me. Maybe that's what I had been missing all these years, true appreciation. I don't know what the future held, but I wasn't about to sit back and let this be the end of my story. It was just a new chapter. The next one had yet to be written. As I packed up my things that day, the weight of what had just happened started to settle in. Greenstone Technologies, the company I had devoted the last 9 years of my life to, was no longer a part of my future. I had spent nearly a decade building my career there, pouring my energy into every project, every client, and every initiative. But as I filled that box with my personal items, memories of those 9 years began to flood back, and I couldn't help but feel the sting of unfulfilled expectations. I glanced around my office one last time. The walls were lined with framed awards and recognitions, each one representing a milestone, a hard-won victory, or a client I had secured. There was the award for Top Performer of the Year I had earned during my second year at Greenstone, the certificates for completing leadership training, and photos from company events. I had helped Greenstone grow from a mid-sized tech firm into a formidable player in the industry. And yet, as I stared at those framed accomplishments, I realized something important. None of it had truly mattered to the people who were supposed to value my work the most. I had always been the kind of person who gave my all, often going above and beyond to help the company succeed. But it never seemed to be enough. There were countless times I had asked for a raise or a promotion, times when I had been told soon, or the timing isn't right, or let's revisit this in a few months. My salary had barely budged in years, and despite the long hours, the weekends spent working through projects, and the sacrifices I had made in my personal life, no one at Greenstone seemed to recognize the toll it was taking on me. I remembered the last time I had sat down with Thomas to discuss my career path. I had asked him point blank, "What's next for me here?" I had worked hard to bring in new business, helped streamline operations, and mentor junior staff. But his response was vague at best, offering little more than a pat on the back and a promise that the company had big plans for me. Yet, when I left that meeting, I felt like nothing had changed. There were moments over the years when I had wondered if I was just a cog in the machine, a person who was valued for what I could do, but not for who I was. I had grown frustrated with the lack of recognition, but I always told myself, just hang in there a little longer, things will get better. I had a family to support, and a career that seemed like the only thing that mattered in those early days. I had put my heart and soul into my work, thinking that if I just kept proving myself, the rewards would come. But with every year that passed, I found myself asking the same question. What more do they want from me? Looking back, I realized that the years of loyalty had been a double-edged sword. I had put everything into Greenstone, but in return, it had taken so much more than I was willing to admit. The long hours, the missed family dinners, the holidays spent working on urgent projects, those were sacrifices I had made willingly. And yet, it was those very sacrifices that had led to my downfall. I had become so absorbed in my work that I had neglected to take care of myself and to advocate for what I deserved. As I stood there, holding the box of my personal items, I couldn't help but wonder how things could have been different. What if I had asked for more? What if I had pushed harder for the recognition I had earned? I had always been afraid of seeming pushy or entitled, but looking back now, I realized that I should have fought for what I was worth. The truth was, no one had ever told me that my worth was tied not just to my work, but to my value as a person. I had allowed myself to become defined by the company, by the titles, and by the results I produced. And when I wasn't given the recognition I thought I deserved, I had allowed myself to feel invisible. I walked out of my office for the last time, passing by the teams I had worked with over the years. Some of them looked up from their desks, offering a quick nod or a sympathetic glance. I forced a smile and kept walking. The building, which had once felt like home, now felt cold and distant. As I made my way to the parking lot, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. I had spent 9 years at Greenstone, giving everything I had, only to be told that it wasn't enough. But I wasn't going to let that be the end of my story. No, I wasn't going to let this moment define me. In fact, as I started my car and drove away from that building, I realized that maybe this was the turning point I needed. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to start thinking about me for once. The road ahead was uncertain, but as I pulled out of the parking lot, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of freedom. My 9 years at Greenstone had shaped me, but they hadn't broken me. The real question now was, what was I going to do with the rest of my life? The day after leaving Greenstone, I woke up with a pit in my stomach that seemed impossible to shake. It was a strange kind of hangover, not from too many drinks the night before, but from a deep, gnawing sense of betrayal. As I slowly made my way out of bed, I was still trying to make sense of what had happened. After all those years of pouring my blood, sweat, and tears into that company, I had been kicked to the curb without so much as a second thought. It was surreal. It felt like I had been in a car accident, but instead of physical injury, I was emotionally bruised. My mind kept spinning in circles, replaying the final moments in Thomas's office. His cold words had echoed in my head ever since I walked out. "You've been job hunting, Eli. That's not the kind of dedication we need here." It stung, more than I cared to admit. All I had wanted was a fair salary, something that matched the effort I put in day after day. But they couldn't even give me that. And now I was being sent out the door because of a ridiculous accusation. As I walked through my house, trying to gather my thoughts, the whole situation felt like a bad dream. I spent the morning mindlessly scrolling through my email inbox, hoping for something, anything, that would provide a sense of clarity or direction. A message from an old friend, a job opportunity, something that would help me take my mind off the mess I had just walked away from. But nothing came. After a few hours, I was getting restless, and the silence of the house only made things worse. Then, just as I was about to give up and check my voicemail again, my phone buzzed with a new email notification. I glanced down, not expecting anything of importance. But when I saw the subject line, I froze. "Let's meet. James Harper, CEO." I stared at the screen for a moment, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. James Harper? The CEO of Skyline Innovations? How in the world did he know me? I had heard of Skyline before, of course. It was one of the most talked about tech startups in the industry, making waves with its innovative approach and rapid growth. But I had never met James personally, nor had I ever applied to work there. So, how could he possibly be reaching out to me? My heart started to race. Could this be real? I quickly opened the email, my fingers shaking slightly as I read through it. "Eli, I've been following your work for some time and have heard a great deal about your leadership at Greenstone. I'd like to meet with you to discuss a potential opportunity at Skyline Innovations. Let me know when you're available. Best, James Harper." The words seemed to blur together for a moment as I tried to make sense of them. My first instinct was to think it was some kind of mistake, but as I reread the message, I felt a strange excitement building up inside me. This was not just some random solicitation or spam email. It was a genuine offer to meet with a CEO of a growing company, someone who had clearly taken an interest in my work. How had James even heard about me? The thought struck me as odd at first. After all, I wasn't a household name in the industry. But then I realized, in this world of tech, news and stories travel fast. Perhaps it was my work at Greenstone, or the high-profile clients I had secured, or maybe even the rumors about my departure that had piqued his interest. Either way, here I was, suddenly in the crosshairs of a major opportunity. I felt a whirlwind of emotions, excitement, disbelief, and even a bit of fear. Was this a sign that I was meant for something bigger than what I had been doing at Greenstone? Or was it just a fleeting opportunity, something that would fall apart before I even had a chance to act on it? I couldn't afford to waste time pondering the what-ifs. I knew I had to take this seriously, even if I didn't fully understand what was at stake yet. So, I quickly typed out a reply, trying to sound as professional as possible despite my racing thoughts. "James, thank you for reaching out. I'd love to meet and learn more about the opportunity at Skyline Innovations. I'm available next week. Please let me know a time that works best for you." After I hit send, I sat back in my chair and let out a deep breath. I had no idea what this meeting would lead to, but one thing was for certain. This was the first flicker of hope I had felt since leaving Greenstone. For the first time in days, I could see a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. In the following hours, I found myself replaying every decision that had led me to this point. I thought about my time at Greenstone, the years of hard work, the long hours, the frustrations of being passed over for raises, the endless promises that never materialized. Despite everything, I had always held out hope that something would change, that my loyalty would be recognized, that my efforts would eventually pay off. But now, as I reflected on what had just happened, I realized that perhaps Greenstone's loss was going to be someone else's gain. I thought about Skyline Innovations and what it represented, a young, ambitious company that had the potential to revolutionize the industry. James Harper was a visionary, and to be sought after by someone like him, someone who had a reputation for taking risks and making bold decisions, was no small thing. Maybe this was my chance to step into a role where I would finally be valued, where I could take control of my career again. But still, a part of me was cautious. After all, I had just been blindsided by my departure from Greenstone. Was I ready to jump into something new so quickly? Would I be walking away from another safe, albeit toxic situation, only to end up in a similar one? I didn't know the answers yet, but one thing was clear. I needed to find out. That evening, I sat down with a glass of whiskey, letting the warmth of the drink settle in as I reflected on my journey. I wasn't just looking for a paycheck anymore. I was looking for something meaningful, something that would reignite the passion I had once felt for my work. And perhaps, just perhaps, Skyline Innovations could be the place where that would happen. The next few days passed in a blur as I prepared for my meeting with James. I cleaned up my resume, researched the company, and rehearsed what I might say. It felt like I was stepping into a new chapter of my life, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that this was all happening so fast. Still, when the time came to meet James, I was ready. I had no idea where this journey would lead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own fate. I walked into the sleek, modern office of Skyline Innovations, feeling a mix of anticipation and curiosity. The building itself was a reflection of the company, bold, cutting edge, and filled with an energy that felt different from what I had experienced at Greenstone. Everything about this place screamed innovation: the open floor plan, the vibrant colors, the constant hum of conversations. It was a stark contrast to the stiff, rigid atmosphere I had grown so used to. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of possibility, like maybe this was where I was meant to be all along. James Harper greeted me warmly as I entered his office, a spacious, minimalist room that somehow felt inviting despite its clean lines and sleek furniture. He stood up from behind his desk, extending his hand with a smile that put me at ease almost immediately. It was a simple gesture, but it felt genuine, like he actually valued my time and presence here. As I shook his hand, I noticed how confident and comfortable he seemed in his own skin. This wasn't a man who was playing games, he was a leader, and it was clear that he was serious about what he wanted. "Eli, it's great to finally meet you in person," he said, motioning for me to take a seat. "I've been following your work at Greenstone, and I have to say, I'm impressed by your achievements. I believe you'd be a fantastic fit for what we're trying to build here at Skyline." I nodded, trying to mask the whirlwind of thoughts swirling in my head. It was hard not to feel a little starstruck. I had heard of James Harper, of course. He was a visionary, known for his ability to spot talent and grow it into something extraordinary. But hearing him speak about my work like it had value, like it mattered, was something I hadn't experienced in years. "Thank you, James," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's been a journey, for sure. And I'm definitely interested in hearing more about your vision for Skyline and where I might fit in." We spent the next few hours talking about the company, its rapid growth, and the direction James saw it heading in the future. He spoke with passion about the company's culture, how they prided themselves on fostering creativity, collaboration, and innovation. It was clear that he had built something special here, and I couldn't help but feel drawn to it. This wasn't just another corporate job. It was a chance to be part of something that mattered, something that would challenge me to grow both personally and professionally. As the conversation progressed, James revealed the role he had in mind for me: Chief Operations Officer, COO. The position would be a significant step up from anything I had done before. It came with responsibilities I had only dreamed of: leading large teams, making key decisions, and shaping the future of a company on the rise. The more he spoke about it, the more it felt like everything I had been working toward. Finally, here was a chance to not only prove myself, but to lead, to make an impact that could be seen and felt by everyone in the company. "What do you think, Eli? James asked, his eyes fixed on me with a sense of anticipation. I know it's a big move, but I believe you're the right person for the job. You've got the skills, the experience, and the drive we need. We're a young company, and we're growing fast. I want you to be part of that growth, to help lead us to the next level. For a moment, I was speechless. I had been in corporate meetings before, but never one where the CEO was so direct, so confident in my abilities. The offer he was making was beyond anything I could have imagined for myself. Not only was it a leadership role, but it also came with a substantial salary increase, far beyond what I had ever received at Greenstone. The benefits were generous, and the potential for career growth seemed limitless. But it wasn't just the compensation that made this opportunity so appealing. It was the culture, the chance to be part of something innovative and forward-thinking. This was a place that valued ideas, that encouraged risk-taking, and that wasn't afraid to disrupt the status quo. It felt like a company that would allow me to flourish in a way that Greenstone never had. I couldn't help but smile as I processed the weight of what James was offering me. This wasn't just a new job. It was a new chapter in my life, one that promised to be filled with excitement, challenge, and fulfillment. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt truly seen and appreciated. I'm honored by the offer, James, I said, my voice filled with conviction. I've been looking for an opportunity like this, something that aligns with my skills, my values, and my vision for the future. I'd be thrilled to accept the role of COO. James's face lit up, and he extended his hand once more. I'm glad to hear that, Eli. Welcome to Skyline Innovations. I'm looking forward to working with you. As we shook hands, I felt a surge of excitement wash over me. This was it. The fresh start I had been hoping for, the opportunity to finally step into a role that would challenge me and allow me to make a real difference. I had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, I felt confident and ready to take it on. As I left the office that day, I couldn't help but think back to the cold dismissal I had received at Greenstone. I had walked away from that company feeling defeated, betrayed, and uncertain about what was next. But now, as I stepped into this new chapter, I realized that sometimes things fall apart for a reason, and sometimes losing one opportunity leads to gaining something far greater. Skyline Innovations wasn't just another job. It was the place where I could finally realize my full potential, and for that, I was beyond grateful. Weeks had passed since I'd walked out of Greenstone for the last time. I had unpacked my office, gotten settled into my new role at Skyline Innovations, and slowly, but surely, I was starting to put the weight of the past behind me. But then, one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, I received a phone call that completely blindsided me. The number flashing on my screen was an unfamiliar one, blocked, but the area code, it was Greenstone's. I didn't know what to expect. My heart began to race. The last time I had spoken to anyone from that company had been the cold, emotionless dismissal by my old boss, Thomas. What did they want now? I hesitated before answering, my mind flooded with mixed emotions. Anger, disbelief, and curiosity all swirled together. I picked up the phone, took a deep breath, and said, "Hello? Eli, it's Mary from HR," came the crisp voice on the other end. It was a name I hadn't heard in months, yet the sound of it instantly brought me back to those years of office meetings and cold transactional conversations. "How are you doing?" she asked, her tone polite but distant. I paused, wondering if I should tell her the truth, that I wasn't doing well at all when they let me go, that I had spent years feeling like a cog in their machine, doing more than my share without so much as a thank you. But I kept it in check. I didn't need to open up wounds. "I'm doing fine," I replied carefully. "What's this about?" "Well, Eli," she continued, and I could hear the subtle urgency in her voice now. "I'm calling on behalf of the board. They've been in some discussions and, well, we're hoping you'll reconsider your decision to leave. There's been a lot of regret over how things ended." I leaned back in my chair. Regret? What was this? Had they really realized the mistake they had made? The disbelief that had clouded my judgment when I was first let go started to turn into something more ironic. "Regret," I echoed, trying to hold back the snark that threatened to spill over. "So, now they're sorry, after everything?" "Yes, Eli," she went on, her voice growing a bit more apologetic. "We realize we made a huge mistake. The board, they're all concerned about the direction Greenstone's been heading without you. Your expertise, your leadership, it's been sorely missed, and they're prepared to offer you something to come back. I felt a knot twist in my stomach. They wanted me back after everything that had happened. The thought of it made my mind spin. For a brief moment, a voice in the back of my head reminded me that it was easy to be tempted by such an offer. Who wouldn't want a bigger paycheck, a fancier title, and a sense of power that came with climbing the corporate ladder? But I wasn't the same guy who had walked out of that building weeks ago. I had made peace with my decision to leave. I had chosen a new path. And even though I didn't know what the future at Skyline held, the truth was, it was far brighter than anything I had left behind. "Mary," I said, cutting through the tension in the conversation. "You're telling me that, after everything that went down, now you want me back?" I could hear her fumbling for the right words. "Eli, please listen. We're offering you a much higher salary, a more senior position. You'll have more influence, more say in the direction of projects. Everything you've wanted from us, we're offering now. We know we messed up, and we want you back, Eli. It's the board's decision, and they believe that if you come back, things can get back on track." I let her words hang in the air for a moment. Was I tempted? Yes, of course. The offer was tempting. Who wouldn't be? They were throwing everything they had at me, thinking that this was how they could fix what had been broken. Higher salary, more influence. It sounded like everything I'd asked for, everything I had deserved for years. But as the words sank in, I realized it was too late. The ship had sailed, and it wasn't just about the money anymore. It wasn't even about the position. It was about trust. It was about respect. And Greenstone had burned both of those bridges when they let me go, without warning, without explanation, and without a single ounce of gratitude for the hard work I had poured into that company. In the years I had been there, I had bled for Greenstone. I had put in long hours, made sacrifices, taken on responsibilities that weren't even mine to take. And in return, I had been met with silence, with no after every request for a raise, with empty promises that were never kept. But when I walked out of that building for the last time, I knew I had finally reached a point where I didn't need to sacrifice any more of myself for an unappreciative company. "Mary," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady, "I'm grateful for the offer, but I'm not coming back." There was a pause. I could hear the sound of papers shuffling again on her side of the line, likely her scrambling to understand why I wasn't jumping at the chance to return to Greenstone. "You're sure about this?" she asked, a touch of disbelief in her voice. I took a deep breath and looked out the window of my office. The skyline of the city stretched before me, and in that moment, everything felt different. I had found a place where I felt valued, a company where I wasn't just a number in a spreadsheet. I had found my worth, and it wasn't tied to the empty promises of a place that had failed to recognize it for so long. "I've made my decision, Mary," I said, my voice firm. "I'm where I need to be now. I've got the opportunity to grow, to make an impact in ways I never could at Greenstone. I'm not going back. I'm sorry." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could practically hear her swallowing her disappointment. Finally, she sighed. "I understand, Eli, but know that the door is always open. If you change your mind, just know we'd be more than happy to have you back." I didn't respond immediately. "The door was always open," she said, but that door had already slammed shut in my mind. "I'm sure," I said quietly. "Goodbye, Mary." I hung up the phone, feeling a strange sense of peace settle over me. The finality of the conversation was oddly liberating. I hadn't just made the right decision, I had made the only decision that mattered, and as I sat back in my chair, looking at the email from Skyline that I'd left open on my screen, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was where I was meant to be, and no matter what Greenstone had to offer, it couldn't change that. Standing in the conference room at Skyline Innovations, I felt a sense of control and purpose that I hadn't felt in years. I was the chief operations officer now, leading a team that actually listened to my ideas. Unlike at Greenstone, where I was ignored, here I had the freedom to make decisions and implement change. The contrast was striking. At Skyline, my contributions were valued, and I was finally part of a company that embraced innovation. It felt empowering to be in a role where I wasn't just another employee, but someone whose work directly shaped the company's future. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. Greenstone had let me go, but now I was in a position to make a real impact. This was my fresh start, and I was determined to make the most of it.